Commissioner to Malta. He has served in the Indian missions in Côte d'Ivoire, Bangladesh, Mongolia, USA, Russia, Sweden, Nigeria, Libya, and Jordan. Ambassador Trigunayat worked as Deputy Chief of Mission in the rank of Ambassador at the Embassy of India, Moscow. It's over to you, Ambassador Trigunayat, but just a small request. If we could finish the discussion in 50 minutes, and that would allow us to take some questions from the audience. It's over to you, sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In continuation to whatever has been said in the first session, in fact, it has set the tone for our discussions going forward. And I have the great honor of moderating this session with such distinguished experts. And I would like to request them to kindly join me on stage. Ambassador Venkatesh Varma, General Lamba, Dr. Wu Xinwen, and Dr. Andrey Kortunov, please. Well, as you know, the session title is Multipolarity, the Hallmarks of the Emerging World Order. Now, this is something that is being talked about in every think tank, in every discourse, that the current unipolar order, which started off after the demise of the Soviet Union, is in decay. And I was pleasantly surprised to see a comment from the US National Security Advisor, as well as their Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, that there are many states and it is a multipolar world, multipolar order. There are many players, this is what it said, which clearly admits today that there are others who matter. Otherwise, we know that we have been talking about the US-Russia competition. We have been talking about Sino-US competition. We have also been talking about the decimation of the multilateral systems that are very critical for the multipolar world and the multipolar order. There needs to be some kind of a semblance. So we are looking at a situation where there is a tremendous deficit. Everyone knows that there is a global governance is in crisis. Honorable Minister also mentioned the reforms in the United Nations not there. For long now, it is still living with the victim and the vanquished syndrome. It does not recognize the reality of the 21st century. The other organizations, we saw that President Trump walked out second time out of the Paris Agreement, the WHO, as well as from the Human Rights Council. Now, these are important markers, and they need to be understood in the right context. And I don't think there is anyone better than this panel here, exactly to tell us how we are going to do that. In the BRICS, as you all know, that there are many countries which can be called civilizational states, China, India, Russia. And they are trying to talk about this new kind of thinking, that if a new world order emerges, could it have those elements? But as India always says, that anything, any kind of an order can emerge if you have these three M's, which are very important: mutual respect, mutual interest, and mutual sensitivities. So even the civilizations, if they want to indulge in this one-upmanship that I'm better than the others, or a global kind of a compass, then it will be from the other name. And then the technology is the biggest disruptor in this 21st century, as we have seen in recent times. You have just heard about the AI Summit, Action Summit, which was held in Paris. And both sides of the Atlantic did not agree to the last statement. US did not sign up to it. So what we are looking at is that there are, even the way things are moving, the countries are also looking at their own national positions, national interests, whichever they perceive, and whether there is a global peace or not is perhaps at the moment the least of anybody's concern. So this is a very, very peculiar situation. Civilizations, cultures, we have always seen that Huntington's theory, clash of civilizations, that also plays out in certain ways. So we'll have to work on it. I'll not talk much because the minister really put everything into perspective, but there are 2 or 3 questions which I would request the panelists to kindly keep in their mind while they are talking about it, that as we talk about multipolarity, does it really signify that major actors are able to coexist or create a framework of modus vivendi and a new, more broadly acceptable rule-based framework? Second, what role will the minilaterals, plurilaterals play reinforcing this new order, multipolar order, like BRICS versus Quad or IPF versus RCEP, with that? And then there is a talk of these civilizational states, and as I mentioned, that how would they interact? How do you perceive that China has come out after the BRI with GDI, GSI, and GCI initiatives? How are they going to be impacted? What is the role of the sovereignty of analysis, especially the purpose of power or the power of the purpose? That is something that we'll see how one goes ahead, and very profound thoughts you have left, especially for the policymakers, that how do they get the geopolitics right is something that is going to define your place going forward. Now I request General Lamba to kindly take the floor and share his thoughts, I think, about technology and how it is going to play out, and that factor for the good or for the detriment of the world. Floor is yours, sir.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I was contemplating whether to come here or sit there, because often there has been time when I have had to ask people, the audience, can you hear me at the back? I would ask, can you see me somewhere at the back? So I chose that this is the appropriate height of the rostrum. I'll share with you aspects of technology and how they drive the world. At the outset, to be able to speak and say this, including my life's experiences handling technology and how it has altered the courses of war, diplomacy, and convergences towards peace or disruption. I'm grateful to MPA, GD for this invitation. Thank you, Chair, personally for giving me this opportunity to speak. And I think this aspect of technology is couldn't be better timed, with the Prime Minister having co-chaired the AI summit in France 3 days back. He's down in the US yesterday and today, and we know that the whole focus is on national security. And what does national security evolve into? Primarily technology. And I'll, with my experience, try and align how it can be truly quantifiable to say which way will diplomacy go, which way will foreign policy go, which way will any other inclination of convergence actually go. And I'll touch 2, 3 brief things. One is, to put it in perspective, we know that where we are seeing a quantum jump in the kind of technological revolutions. The first one, you remember, happened sometimes in the 18th century, and it was primarily to do with the invention of the locomotive and the telephone. The second industrial revolution, invention of the motor and shipbuilding by United Kingdom. And then they ruled the world for 200 years. Third, after the Second World War, it was the United States which came in quantifiable jump by its nuclear atomic bomb, by the kind of missiles it could build, by the kind of rockets. Where it took the technology from, the V1, V2 or elsewhere in the world, didn't matter. But come 1946 onwards, it was the third revolution that they brought in. Third revolution also seems to merge in our context with the space that was given to internet and communications. So that's a long span in which they've had. And we now see virtually the fourth revolution taking place with the advent of AI, which is almost 10 years old now, 2016 when we saw the first emergence. And where it will take us, we have the DeepSeek coming up last week. And we are in, I think, for a transformation in what technology is going to do to a state's survival, its strength, and for countries like India that wish to emerge as a strong, dominant, or at least a superpower, a power that matters, I think it'll matter. It'll concern us considerably. I would also seen this practically out of these revolutions. In the 71 war, I saw the liberation in Bangladesh, where we saw the level of technology. It was there was no technology virtually. It was all either ballistics or it was simple communication, radio, HF communications, not even VHF in a way, and whatever else. And we've actually lived through the second generation going into the third generation. That means the fourth and fifth generation. And I think it's important to say that today, one could say that a country's position in the international power hierarchy is determined whether it can identify its strengths in terms of technology, develop it, use it for its domination, and finally secure its technology. So I think the span is very large. And when we enter the military domain, it can be easily more explainable. To contextualize technology in a world order, it's important that the uniqueness of discovery, invention, new advents in technology have to be, like I just said, kept up and maintained in momentum, in exploration, and then domination. If you briefly look at the impact of technology on the geopolitical power dynamics, I think there are three facets to it. One is in the military use, second is the economic use, and third is the communications or cultural use. And I won't touch much.
Their initial comments to 4 to 5 minutes, please, as we have another session. And I would also request all the panelists to remain seated because aesthetically that would look better and nicer. So the panelists they can remain seated and they can respond to whatever the question is.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. The way the technology has progressed, how it is being played out, and what India needs to do, and what are the challenges. And actually, you have set the stage for our next guest to talk about exactly how China is trying to deal with this technological revolution, especially since everybody is talking about the DeepSeek. Firstly, I must congratulate you for doing what you did. That has changed the whole thinking on the AI domain. So we'll request your views exactly on all the three dimensions, basically, on the multipolarity, on technology, as well as on civilization state. Dr. Wu, please.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I have to say sorry that Professor Zhang Weiwei could not come here. But the good news is that he will join us virtually and speak in a session tomorrow. So it's my honor and great pleasure to speak here in place of Professor Zhang. By the way, this is my first visit to India. I'm very interested and excited in experiencing India's diversity, vitality, and prosperity. Just as stated in the forum documents, the world order is going through considerable transformations. China's President Xi Jinping regards them as the great changes unseen in a century. Without doubt, the America's unipolar dominance is in decline, and a new multipolar world is coming near and fast. Even the newly appointed U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, just as the chairman mentioned, has recognized that it's not normal for the world to simply have a unique power. In my view, the unipolar dominance is not only anomaly and outdated, but also immoral and unjust. Under the unipolarity, virtually everything, from dollars to trade, to technologies, to climate changes, can be weaponized and sanctions. Missiles and color revolutions are the norms and used routinely at will, causing wars, havocs, and untold human sufferings for millions upon millions of people. And this order has to be changed and will be changed. With the rise of China, India, and Russia, the expanding BRICS and other members of the global south, a multipolar world order is emerging fast. In case of China, with less than 8 decades of socialist construction, China has become, for the first time in human history, the world's largest economy by purchasing power parity since 2014, the largest industrial, manufacturing, and trading nation with the world's largest consumer market, at a speed of accomplishing almost one industrial revolution every decade since the early 1980s. China is now at the forefront of the fourth industrial revolution with big data, AI, just as you mentioned, the DeepSeek, and quantum technologies. And now the only country capable of providing goods, services, and experience from all the 4 industrial revolutions to the whole world. All this has changed China and the global landscapes forever. It's in this context, China launched the Belt and Road Initiative 20 years ago, with over 150 countries participating in thousands of projects based on the China idea of discussing together, building together, benefiting together. And the BRICS, the BRI, has now become the largest common good and platform for international cooperation in human history. This is laying a good foundation for the emerging multipolar world order. As a civilizational state, China believes in the motto of united and prosper, rather than the Western belief in divide and rule. China embraces a shared future for humankind, as contrary to America's, if you are not at the table, you are going to be on the menu. Nowadays, China, India, and Russia share the common objects.
We have carried on dialogue for peace, because borders are very important. You mentioned about nation states. We live in the nation state. So now we need to protect our borders, respect borders. And as our minister had said, that relations can go on. We talk of mutual respect, mutual sensitivities, mutual interests are key. We collaborate in a lot of platforms. And we are 2 great neighbors, and we need to learn to respect each other.
Now, last but not the least, but the most important in today's geopolitical context, and so much has been just happening in the last 2-3 days alone. Between President Trump and President Putin, it looks like things are going to change in a very big way. But who else can tell us better than Dr. Kortunov? Cheers.
Well, thank you. To express my deep gratitude for the invitation from the Usanas Foundation to take part in this distinguished event. It is not only my honor, but it is also my pleasure. I think that we foreigners, when we go to India, we usually limit ourselves to New Delhi And though New Delhi is, of course, a great metropolitan area, but India is much larger just than the capital city. And I think that by coming to places like Jaipur, we see how large and how diverse the country is. It also teaches us humility. We understand that our agendas, our concerns, our hopes, and our fears that look so central to us are clearly not the only game in town. And there are people in many places that have their own views and their own priorities, which are understandably and rightfully different from ours. Since I'm the last speaker on this panel, let me try to share with you some of the reflections that I have regarding the presentations that we have just listened to. And the first question for me is, why do we discuss all these notions? Like multipolarity, like civilization state, like the role of technologies. I think the reason is that the old framework, the old paradigms that we used for so long to explain international relations and the changes in the global politics work no longer. They are losing their explanatory and their predictive powers. So we need to come with a different language, with a different wording, with a different narrative of what is going on in the world. If we want not only to reflect on what is going in this world, but if we want to foresee what might happen a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. That's why I think all these three notions are so critical to our understanding of the picture of the world. Let me start with multipolarity. It is probably the most commonly used notion of the three that we discussed today. And I remember talking about multipolarity since late 1990s. You know, when Primakov came to India, he spoke about multipolarity, implying the need to build strong relations between Beijing, New Delhi, and Moscow. But multipolarity is almost like the line of horizon. It moves away from us once we approach it. And of course, it will be asymmetrical as it has always been. In some important dimensions of global politics, the world is still unipolar. Take, for instance, the financial sector. We are trying to emancipate ourselves from dollar, but it is very difficult. And it's not just about using dollar, it's about the whole system of modern financial institutions that are linked to the US currency. If we are talking about the economic dimension, it is probably more bipolarity rather than multipolarity, given the comparative advantage of two great nations that are leading in the economic and technological development. Of course, if you take the political realm, multipolarity is more explicit, but even here, everybody is looking at what is going on in Washington these days. So even in this domain, there are elements of unipolarity. On the other hand, when we are talking about the modern international system, clear enough, small nations, mid-sized nations are becoming more active. They do not fit into this system of limited number of poles in the world. They don't want to be second-tier powers. They don't want to be second-class citizens in the modern international system. So the system will be much more complex and much more controversial than just
As smart as is stupid. So I think that I'll not come in more, but I'll open the floor because we have left about 5 minutes. For any questions? So audience, please identify yourself and the person you're asking a question. My question is to General Lamba.
What's your name?
I am Madhav Singh. I am a mechanical engineer. I build machines. And this is my curiosity, that is it at the time when we stop using
Varma, but anybody can answer. Ambassador Varma, you talked about civilizations. I think all of them talked about this. And I think that the Russian amazing doctor at the end also asked that same question. Who gets to define who's a civilization? And you slightly answered that. Lieutenant General Lambda, I listened to what you said about Israel, and I'm just going to add that the biggest failure on October 7th was not the technology, okay? The terrorists took care of the technology, and then it comes back to human thought. And I pose it out there, similar perhaps to the man before, that at the end, technology doesn't replace us. It's there. It's supposed to be part of us. And when you go to AI, how does that's already different. Because for us, the technology was part of what blinded us. Not the only thing, but part of. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am General Sudhakar. I am based at Jaipur, retired. My question pertains to unpredictability. The world of multipolarity, we've been talking multi-alignment, 21st century. What comes to me as a soldier, to my mind, is despite America being a superpower, they still couldn't predict that 9/11 could take place. They couldn't take any steps to prevent. Despite Israeli forces being a formidable armed force in the planet, they still couldn't predict that Hamas would be attacking on 7th October. Despite what we are, Galwan had to take place. So has Kargil. In the entire history of military science, whenever there has been a military offensive against a defender, it has always been pointed, finger has always pointed to the intelligence, lack of predictable or proactive action. Can technology be so furthered so as to enable us to take proactive action so as to prevent such kind of occurrences in future? That's a question to the entire distinguished panelists.
Any last question? First one would be to the last speaker. When you talked of the problems of multipolarity, are you suggesting, and I would agree if that is the case, that multipolarity is itself self-defeating because it effectively implements a situation of divisions, weakening every participant, while some deep state from somewhere, deep state, deep world, whatever, actually carries the day. Is that one presumption? If that be the presumption, then a second question would arise, which would be addressed to Ambassador Trigunayat, wherein, because when you were speaking in the first session, then you mentioned that Trump is against war, and he has a different set of playing cards involving tariffs and things. And then, almost contrary to that, at the start of this session, you talked of the 4 V's which represent the Indian, the two kind of, if this is our preparation, then I think we've landed up in Washington very unprepared, because the two don't agree.
You saw what happened.
Exactly. And one last question to, one last little question, it's a one-liner, to Professor. When you said, as you very rightly said, that India and China have not always been at loggerheads, and for most part through history we've been, let us say, at least we've never been at a state of war until the British came in. And is it the legacy of the British and the Opium Wars which have redefined India and China as adversaries? And whether the
the stayover of the British divide and rule establishment by way of the bureaucracies and their Westphalian thinking, or their imperialist Westphalian combined thinking, is that what ensures that India and China will remain at loggerheads? And can we surmount this?
On correlation between states, civilization, states, and technology. See, mine was a sort of a theoretical presentation. I didn't take any particular names. But, for example, of Israel or India's experience, it's very clear. A state like India ought to, not necessarily it is always there, define its own purpose. It has to define its own purpose. And many states could define their purpose as power for the sake of power, for survival, for competition, for conflict. Civilizational states, in a sense, tend to go beyond that because they have deeper roots to the land, they have deeper cultural values, and your purpose of state formation, of state protection, is a little higher than mere survival and conflict. Now, how does technology play into this? We've seen many examples where technologies can create such drastic power asymmetries where, irrespective of what your purpose is, the survival of the state itself is at risk. You cannot allow that to happen. But once that challenge has been met, you go back to your original purpose. Because we can't have a perpetual state of war. We can't have a perpetual state of domination, whether regionally or internationally or... Now, the Westphalian state model, the Western state model that grew in Europe and spread across the world, created a certain balance of deterrence. And we have recognized that deterrence is useful, necessary. It is sensitive to technological changes, but in the ultimate analysis, it is not a guarantor of perpetual peace. It is our hope that India will take the lead, and along with other states who think like us, that to replace hegemony with a broader purpose of national life, a broader purpose of international cooperation. The United Nations Charter, which says that sovereign equality of states also means a certain uniformity of states, is now being sort of objected to in different parts of the world. Because uniformity of one global standard of national life is something that people are in a sense uncomfortable with. And you have various dimensions of that. I'm answering only for how India should see it. And India has a history. We've also known when we have fallen short of state protection, what can happen to us. But now that we have pulled ourselves off from the ground, if we are to see our purpose in the next 30, 40 years, I would appeal that we should have, the purpose of higher purpose should be pursued, That is the meaning of a civilization state.
To everything that I read about, probably evolution, in case you rightly said, is an ongoing thing. It evolves, it applies, it gets affected and gets controlled or superseded. A revolution, I stuck to those first and second revolutions, or probably third. They've been established historically as those periods, long periods of time, in which powers ruled by strength of those revolutions. And I marked just two in everything. And I named the locomotive and something else in one, and then the telephone and electricity. So I think there were periods universally acknowledged, and that's, I also mentioned, UK ruled the world for 200 years after those revolutions. Great production, but with the with the explosion of the atomic device, the power shifted in an extreme way, and that is lasting till today, but we call it the third revolution. So I'm using standardized terms and acceptances. I don't think there's a very fine rational The other one was, ma'am, you mentioned about the Israel. When I was trying to say, I remember I used the word collaborative. Anywhere when I explained Gaza, and that's long time back, it's not recently, that it had the super strength of an ability of one single intrusion being stopped, detected, and neutralized. And I've been to Israel and seen the most advanced technologies. So somewhere I think what you said is, I also consider it may be failure of intelligence. But where we need to get concerned is, it's not human. It's systemic intelligence. Probably the intention that's supposed to be picked out in intelligence is something that may have slipped Israel, or they were too confident that this could not happen. But this was not built up overnight. And General Sudhakar, your last line of your question, you made a question, your last line you said about unpredictability.
Can't technology be so furthered and developed so as to enable us to take preventive steps so that these things can be prevented from occurring?
So I think it's an ongoing process. Technology will always remain so dynamic. And I've just listed out that there are nation states, there are civilizations, there are China, the ambassador from China said so much about why a nation state is required at all. You can coexist like we were coexisting. But I think this is a source of competition across the world, and that's why we say it is going to change. So I don't think there is any definitive line to any technology.
Border problem between China and India derived from the Westphalia system of nation state and also from the British colonialism. So right now we need to maybe have a way of thinking how to transcend this kind of narrow way of thinking, and how to let the border become a bridge rather than a barrier or the line of confrontation. So that's my main thought. I also would like to add one point about the multipolar world is self-defeating. I think it's not necessarily self-defeating. If we could do a better job, especially in the cooperation and inclusive, I think the multipolar order does not only consist of nations, civilizational state. Some civilizational community can also join the multipolar world and take their own responsibility. For example, I think Africa must be join the multipolar world system. But Africa is hard to say it's a civilizational state. So maybe we could have some open mind. Thank you.
The question that I had was about multipolarity. No, is it better? Yeah, about multipolarity. Multipolarity is about the distribution of power within the system, right? So in a way, a multipolar system is more democratic and more representative than the unipolar system or than a bilateral system. Yeah, but it is, yeah, but that is exactly the point, that it is about distribution tells us nothing about the nature of the relationship within the system.
Thank you so much to all our distinguished panelists. Thank you so much.